Hello everyone. Tonight we plunge into the shadow-drenched annals of myth, not to merely recount tales, but to unravel a profound lie, a pervasive misconception that has stalked humanity for millennia. You think you know the werewolf, don't you? A ravenous beast, born of a bite, a creature of pure, unadulterated evil, a slavering engine of terror under a full moon. But what if I told you that the very first werewolves weren't monsters at all? What if they were victims, tragic figures cursed, yes, but often more to be pitied than feared, their transformations a testament to divine wrath, not inherent malice? Prepare to challenge everything you thought you knew, because the evolution of the werewolf is a brutal, beautiful, and utterly terrifying journey from a condemned soul to a journey that will peel back the layers of fear, revealing the true beast, fey, and the enduring human struggle beneath. Our odyssey begins not in a moonlit forest, but in the heart of ancient corruption. Our story begins in the sun-drenched, yet morally corrupt, kingdom of Arcadia, a land where the gods walked among mortals, their presence both a blessing and a terrifying sword of Damocles. This is not the tale of a demon's pact or a fanged infection, but of cosmic justice, a primal decree that birthed the very first man-wolf. His name echoed through antiquity, a byword for blasphemy, and a hunger for the grotesque, King Lycan. He ruled with an iron fist, his heart a stone, his piety a mere masquerade. His kingdom was a crucible of depravity, a testament to humanity's capacity for cruelty, and Lycan stood at its sickening zenith, reveling in the dark underbelly of power. Zeus, the king of Olympus, had long heard the whispers of Lycan's transgressions, his contempt for sacred laws, his barbaric sacrifices, his unholy feasts of human flesh. Disguised as a weary traveler, the thunder god descended from the heavens, cloaked in humility, seeking hospitality, seeking truth, seeking to quell the rising tide of sin that threatened to engulf the mortal realm. But Lycan, bloated with arrogance, saw only an opportunity for a cruel sport, a twisted test of divine omniscience. He doubted the stranger's divinity, and to prove his point, he conceived an act so heinous, so utterly beyond the pale of human decency, it would forever brand him in the darkest corners of myth. He murdered his own son Nyctimus, or perhaps a helpless Molossian hostage, a child, butchering the innocent, and then, with a twisted, avaricious grin, served the cooked flesh to Zeus, mixed with the entrails of sacrificial animals. Let's see, he thought, his eyes glinting with malicious glee. If this truly is a god, he will know. The silence that fell upon the royal dining hall was not one of reverence, but of an awful, pregnant dread, a stillness more terrifying than any storm. Zeus, king of gods, whose fury could unmake worlds and shatter empires, felt the divine spark within him ignite, not with hunger, but with an incandescent, purifying rage. His eyes, usually pools of cerulean sky, burned like twin supernovas, hotter than 1,000 suns, searing into Lycan's very soul. The air crackled with raw power, electricity dancing on the marble. The very ground beneath Lycan's blood-stained feet began to tremble, and the massive stone pillars groaned as if in agony. Lycan had not merely questioned a god. He had defiled the sacred bond of hospitality, desecrated the most profound taboo of all human society, the sanctity of life and the horror of cannibalism. He had, in essence, reduced humanity to its most base, its most ravenous, its most bestial form, betraying the divine gift of consciousness. And so Zeus, with a voice that thundered through the halls, rattling the very foundations of the world, declared his judgment. "You have shown the heart of a beast, Lycan," the god boomed, his words echoing with cosmic finality, "and a beast you shall become." The transformation was agonizing, a living hell made manifest, not a swift change, but a slow, excruciating unraveling of his very being. It was not instantaneous, but a torturous, bone-snapping process. His skin, once regal beneath fine robes, bristled with coarse iron-grey fur, sprouting from every pore like grotesque, alien weeds pricking and tearing at his flesh. His hands, once accustomed to wielding scepter and dagger, elongated, his fingers fusing, his nails sharpening into predatory claws that scraped against the flagstones, drawing blood. His teeth, that had savoured the forbidden, erupted into razor-sharp fangs, tearing through his own gums, filling his mouth with the metallic taste of his own agony. His spine arched, his limbs contorted, snapping into alien angles, his muscles convulsing, his human voice, capable of command and deceit, dissolved into a guttural growl, a mournful, tortured howl ripped from a throat that no longer belonged to him. A sound that tore at the very fabric of his sanity. The world, once ordered by his decrees, became a maelstrom of primal sensations, a symphony of sense and sounds too overwhelming for his fractured mind, each a torment, the moon, once a distant silver orb, now pulled at him with an irresistible, terrifying force, awakening a hunger he could not comprehend. He ran on all fours, a blur of grey fur and raw instinct, into the darkened, ancient forests of Arcadia, his once royal mind a fractured echo of his former self. A king reduced to a beast, he carried not merely the burden of fur and fangs, but the unbearable weight of a human consciousness trapped within a ravenous form, screaming silently against its imprisonment. His eyes, still retaining a glimmer of human terror, of desperate, pleading understanding, peered out from beneath the low brow of a beast, a living hell behind two burning embers. He was no longer a king, no longer a man, but a wolf, condemned to stalk the wilderness, forever driven by the same ravenous hunger, the same unholy impulse that had led to his downfall. The taste of meat, once a deliberate transgression, became an uncontrollable, searing need, eclipsing all thought, all remorse, all memory of his former life. He was a prisoner in his own flesh, cursed to embody the very savagery he had embraced. Yet, this was not the snarling, gleeful monster of slasher films. This was a king, stripped of his humanity, bound by an eternal, divine curse, a living monument to hubris and its horrifying consequences. He wasn't evil incarnate. He was a punishment made flesh, an object lesson in divine wrath, a creature whose every waking moment was an internal scream against his inescapable fate. His transformation wasn't contagious. It was singular, a personal damnation, an inescapable fate, a solitary torment, a hellish descent into bestiality. The horror was not in the wolf itself, but in the brutal, irreversible loss of self. The human soul imprisoned within an alien, bestial form, forever wrestling with the predator that had usurped its throne. It was a cautionary tale, a stark warning against the savage heart lurking beneath the civilized veneer, a chilling prophecy that we, too, might lose ourselves to our basest, most primal instincts, consumed by our own dark appetites, shedding our humanity like a discarded skin. This was the nascent seed of the werewolf, a seed of profound sorrow and desperate loss, not of pure, unadulterated. But the myth, like a living thing, would evolve, adapting to the fears and beliefs of new ages, each metamorphosis more chilling than the last. The ancient world had given birth to a victim. The world would soon demand a monster, a true harbinger of dread. Yet, as we shift our gaze from the sun, baked plains of Greece to the mist, shrouded forests and icy fjords of the north, and the ancient emerald lands of the Celts, the narrative twists, offering us not one, but multiple origins, each revealing a different, often contradictory, facet of humanity's relationship with the wolf. Here, the wolf isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it is a sacred bond, a chosen path. The line between man and beast becomes not a curse, but a deliberate stride. In the brutal sagas of the Norse, we encounter the berserkers and Alfnafe, the wolf-skinned ones. These were not men cursed by gods, but warriors who fate chose to channel the primal spirit of the beast, to embrace the fury of the wild. Imagine them, massive, terrifying figures who, before battle, would howl like wolves, their voices ripping through the silence of the battlefield, gnaw on their shields until they splintered into shards, and enter a state of ecstatic, uncontrollable frenzy. Their eyes would glaze over, their muscles would bulge, veins standing out like ropes, their human voices replaced by guttural snarls and blood-curdling roars that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. They were said to wear the pelts of wolves, not as disguise, but as a spiritual conduit, allowing the essence of the predator to possess them entirely, blurring the very bound. Their strength was superhuman, their pain threshold, non-existent, impervious to steel and fire. They fought without armor, their fury, their only shield, their teeth and claws as deadly as any blade, a whirlwind of primal destruction. Crucially, these were not innocent victims, nor hapless sufferers of a curse. They were living, breathing weapons, embodying the untamed, ferocious spirit of the wild, a terrifying force of nature unleashed. Their transformation was internal, a psychological shift, a complete surrender to the primal instincts of the hunt. Yet, often it was a temporary, almost ritualistic state, a battle trance, a chosen madness. They were men fey acting fey as wolves, men fey becoming fey the wolf in spirit, not men fey cursed fey to fey be fey wolves, eternally against their will. The fear they inspired was born of their sheer ferocity, their unbridled, visceral power, a force drawn directly from the very heart of nature, from Odin's own wild hunt, rather than an external curse or demonic influence. It spoke to a different kind of human desire, the yearning for invincible strength, for unyielding courage, for the sheer exhilaration of untamed power, even at the cost of one's own calm, one's own human restraint. It was power, raw and untamed, but often wielded by human will, not divine decree, a conscious, terrifying choice. They were the wolf, but they were fey wolf, a reflection of the ultimate warrior spirit, the savage heart embraced. Meanwhile, across the turbulent seas, in the enigmatic, ancient realm of Celtic mythology, the wolf takes on an even more complex, often mystical role. Here, shape-shifting is not a divine punishment or a battle trance, but an inherent magical ability, often passed down through bloodlines or granted by powerful enchantments tied to the land itself. Imbued with its ancient primordial energy, the Felsad, or werewolves of Ireland, for example, were sometimes depicted not as malevolent monsters, but as benevolent guardians, protectors of the... They weren't always monsters. They were part of the very fabric of the land, shifting between human and wolf forms with fluid grace, often with full conscious control over their transformations. Their duality was a natural state, a dance between worlds. Consider the vivid, chilling yet often sympathetic tales of the werewolves of Ossory from medieval Ireland. These individuals were not condemned, but were members of a lineage, a tribe with the innate ability to transform every 7 years, or sometimes at will, at sacred times of the year, like Samhain. During their lupine phase, they would leave their human bodies behind, guarded by their kin, and roam as wolves, acting as protectors or scouts, carrying messages between worlds. Crucially, they were often depicted as allies to humans, sometimes even speaking in guttural ancient tongues, guiding lost travelers through treacherous paths, or sharing ancient wisdom gleaned from their communion with the wild. They were part of the natural order, not an aberration or an evil presence. The awe and terror they might inspire were born of their wildness, their otherness, their untamed spirit. But it was tempered by respect, by a sense of ancient magic, and a primal spiritual connection to the deep, untamed soul of the Celtic lands. Their transformations were not a loss of self, but an expansion, an embrace of a different, powerful facet of their being, a deeper connection to the very... These diverse interpretations, the Norse warrior embracing the wolf spirit for battle, achieving a state of terrifying martial ecstasy, the Celtic shapeshifter flowing between forms with ancient magic and often benevolent intent, a guardian of the wild paint a far more nuanced picture than the simple, monstrous archetype we often conjure. They show us that the werewolf, in its earliest iterations, was not a singular, horrifying entity. It was a spectrum, from the tragic victim of divine fury, consumed by his own hubris, to the revered, powerful manifestation of primal force, a chosen champion or the mystical guardian tied to the very soul of the wilderness, a creature of ancient magic. The common thread was the profound, unsettling blur between man and beast, but the fey reason fey for that blur and its moral implications remain fluid, shape-shifting with the cultural landscape. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's complex relationship with nature, power, and the unknown. But a storm was gathering. A new fear, cold and sharp as winter winds, would soon sweep across Europe, transforming the very essence of the werewolf, twisting its diverse origins into a singular, terrifying nightmare. The age of the benevolent shapeshifter and the honorable wolf, warrior, was drawing to a close. The age of the demon, beast, the age of paranoia and persecution, was about to begin, and it would change everything, forging the monster that would stalk our darkest dreams for centuries to come, an unholy terror fueled by religious fervor and societal dread. With the dawn of the medieval era and the inexorable rise of Christianity as the dominant spiritual force across Europe, the fluid, multifaceted understanding of the man wolf began to curdle into something far more sinister, far more absolute. The nuanced distinctions between a cursed king, a chosen warrior, or a magical shapeshifter were systematically stripped away, replaced by a terrifying singular truth. The werewolf was no longer a victim, no longer a hero, no longer a mystical being of the natural world. It became a monster, pure, unadulterated evil, a demon in disguise, a minion of hell. This dramatic shift wasn't accidental. It was ideological, a calculated weapon in the ongoing spiritual war. The Church, in its quest to consolidate spiritual authority and eradicate pagan beliefs, sought to demonize anything that blurred the sacred lines between man and beast, between the divine and the diabolical. The wolf, once a symbol of ferocity and courage, became inextricably linked with the forces of darkness, with the devil himself, a ravening fiend from the deepest pits of damnation. Werewolves were now seen as heretics, witches, or sorcerers who had made a pact with Satan, trading their immortal souls for bestial power, a visible sign of their eternal damnation. The transformation was no longer a curse from an Olympian god or an inherent magical gift. It was a dark pact, a damnation earned, a visible, horrifying mark of infernal allegiance, a manifestation of unholy corruption. Imagine the pervasive terror that gripped the European countryside, a terror born of harsh realities and inflamed by fervent belief. Real wolves, driven by hunger in brutal, protracted winters, often attacked livestock, sometimes even desperate, isolated people. These brutal realities merged seamlessly with a burgeoning fear of demonic influence. A man found murdered, half devoured in the deep, dark woods. It wasn't just a wolf. It was a werewolf fey, and that werewolf was not some distant supernatural entity, but a human being, a neighbor, someone who had willingly shed their humanity to become a tool of the infernal. The psychological horror of this notion was profound, chilling to the bone. The enemy was not just outside the village walls, lurking in the shadows, but fey within, faith in them, indistinguishable until the moon or some other blasphemous trigger revealed their true. Paranoia became a way of life, a constant, gnawing dread in every shadowed corner, behind every friendly smile. Who among us harbors the beast? The trials began, not just witch trials, but savage, brutal werewolf trials, accusations fueled by desperation, fear, and malicious gossip, swept through communities like wildfire, consuming the innocent. People confessed under duress, under unimaginable torture, to transforming into wolves, to devouring children, to cavorting with the devil in unholy sabbats. The most infamous cases, like that of Peter Stump in Germany in 1589, cemented the werewolf's image as a monstrous cannibalistic fiend. Stump, a seemingly respectable farmer, was accused of being a werewolf for 25 years, using a magic girdle given by the devil to transform, committing unspeakable acts of cannibalism and murder against women and children, even devouring his own son's brains. His confession, extracted under excruciating torture, described his gruesome deeds in vivid, chilling detail, a grotesque litany of horror that fed the collective hysteria. The brutal execution of Stump Broken on a wheel, flayed, beheaded, and burned, his wolf form, represented by a wooden wolf figure alongside him, served as a stark, horrifying warning, a public spectacle designed to terrorize and control, to purge the unholy from the land. The medieval werewolf was not just a beast, it was a symbol of absolute depravity, a betrayal of God and man, a walking, howling embodiment of damnation, a chilling reflection of humanity's deepest fears about its own capacity for evil. The Fei of the transformation also solidified, shifting from external magic or internal will to the insidious, terrifying power. The idea that a scratch or a bite from a werewolf could infect another, passing on the curse like a virulent disease, became deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness. This added another layer of existential dread, a terror that could leap from one victim to another, spreading like a plague through the very soul of society. No longer was it just a matter of divine wrath or a personal, evil choice. Now the very act of encountering the monster could condemn you, turning you into the very thing you feared most. It was a plague of the soul, a contagion of evil, a shadow that could fall upon anyone, anywhere, at any time, an indiscriminate, terrifying curse. This era marked the darkest chapter for the werewolf. Stripped of its mythological complexities, it was distilled into pure, unadulterated terror. It was a vessel for all societal anxieties about the wildness of nature, the inherent depravity of man, and the ever-present, insidious threat of the devil, a monstrous scapegoat for humanity's own failings. The shift was complete, from a divinely cursed victim to a monstrous, soul-damned fiend, from a tragic figure to a ravenous, unstoppable killer. The stage was now set for the ultimate transformation, not in flesh and blood, but in ink and celluloid. The beast was ready for its close-up, ready to howl its way into our modern consciousness, forever changed, forever terrifying, forever stalking our night. As the centuries turned, and the age of enlightenment and reason gradually pushed back the shadows of overt superstition, the werewolf did not vanish. Instead, it retreated into a new kind of wilderness, the boundless landscape of the human imagination, finding fertile ground in the burgeoning worlds of literature, and eventually cinema here. The beast would undergo its most profound, and perhaps most, it would shed its chains of literal demonic pacts, only to embrace the more insidious, psychological horrors of the human psyche, becoming a mirror to our own internal battles. The Gothic romantics of the 19th century were the first to truly reclaim the werewolf, not as a purely external monster, but as a potent metaphor for the internal struggle, the duality of man. Authors like Lord Byron, though never completing his werewolf narrative, and later the more subtle explorations in works like The White Wolf of the Hartz Mountains by Frederick Marryat, or even the chilling ambiguity of Varney the Vampire, began to reintroduce a tragic, tortured element. The werewolf became less an agent of pure evil and more a tortured soul, a figure caught between two warring worlds, the human and the beast battling an uncontrollable primal urge that threatened to consume them. The horror was no longer just the beast's savage attack, but the human's agonizing awareness, the profound loss of self, the internal war waged against the transforming flesh and the ravenous instincts that threatened to usurp sanity. It was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but with fur and fangs, driven by a lunar cycle, a relentless, inescapable fate. The monster was a profound reflection of our own darker impulses, a primal scream against the thin, fragile veneer of civilization, a chilling prophecy that any of us, given the right circumstances, might succumb to the savagery within, shedding our humanity with the rising moon. But it was the silver screen, in the roaring 20th century, that truly forged the iconic werewolf we recognize today, solidifying its place as a cornerstone of horror. The nascent art of filmmaking found in the werewolf a perfect subject, a creature of dramatic, visceral transformation, capable of evoking both profound human pathos and electrifying primal terror. Early films, often constrained by rudimentary special effects, hinted at the horror using shadows and quick cuts to suggest the unseen, relying on implication rather than explicit display. Yet, it was Lon Chaney Jr., His masterful portrayal of Lawrence Talbot in Universal's 1941 classic, The Wolfman, that cemented the modern archetype, etching it into the collective unconscious of millions, defining the very essence of cinematic lycanthropy. Talbot was the quintessential tragic figure, a modern Lycaon reborn in the age of cinema. He didn't choose his fate. He was bitten, infected by a beast he bravely tried to save a woman from. His transformation was a curse, a torment, not a choice. He was a good man, wrestling with an evil he couldn't control, a beast he deeply feared becoming, knowing the devastation he would wreak. Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. The iconic poem declared, capturing the inescapable doom that hung over Talbot like a shroud, a poetic curse that resonated with audiences. The film amplified the psychological dread, showing Talbot's internal struggle, his despair, his desperate, futile attempts to prevent his monstrous transformations, his heartbreaking cries of, "I am a wolf," echoing with heart, wrenching terror embodying the ultimate loss of self. The horror was not just the wolf's rampage, but the man's agonizing realization of what he had become, the innocent blood on his furred paws, the chilling awareness of his own monstrosity. This was Lycaon reborn, but with a beating, tortured human heart, forced to witness his own descent into the abyss, unable to stop the transformation. Then, as cinema evolved and special effects technology advanced with breadth, the 1980s, a veritable golden age for practical prosthetic effects, allowed filmmakers to finally bring the agonizing, visceral process of lycanthropic transformation to terrifying, explicit life. Films like John Landis's An American Werewolf in London, 1981, and Joe Dante's The Howling. 1981 were not just movies, they were game changers, shattering previous illusions and setting new standards for creature horror. No longer content with a simple dissolve or a quick cut hidden in shadow. These movies showcase the bones snapping, the skin tearing, the fur erupting, the flesh bubbling and contorting in gruesome, glorious, unflinching detail. The transformation itself became a central spectacle of horror, a primal scream of flesh rending and reshaping, a grotesque ballet of suffering and metamorphosis, a visceral assault on the senses. The werewolf was no longer just a man in a costume. It was a special effect, a creature of pure, unbridled terror, designed to shock, disgust, and mesmerize audiences with its grotesque reality, a nightmare made flesh before their very eyes. The tragic element often remained, a whisper beneath the roars, but it was frequently overshadowed, even devoured, by the sheer unstoppable. The werewolf became less a symbol of internal conflict, and more a force of nature, an engine of primal destruction, a literal killing machine. Its motivations became simpler, more savage: hunger, instinct, insatiable rage, a pure predatory drive. The human host was often just a temporary vessel, a prelude to the true monster, a ticking clock until the beast was unleashed. This was the definitive shift from psychological dread to visceral body horror, from the quiet terror of a cursed human soul to the full-throated, blood-curdling roar of a creature utterly unleashed. A testament to the primal, untamed fear of the predator that lurks in the deepest parts of our collective unconscious. In contemporary storytelling, the werewolf continues its relentless evolution, shape-shifting to fit the anxieties and fascinations of our own time. Sometimes it returns to its tragic roots, exploring themes of identity, otherness, prejudice, and the struggle to belong in a world that fears what it doesn't understand. Seeking empathy in its monstrous form. Other times it is an anti-hero, a powerful, brooding figure navigating a complex supernatural underworld, or even a protagonist, a dark mirror reflecting our own complex moral landscape, our capacity for both good and evil. But one thing is undeniable: the modern werewolf, whether a tormented soul battling its inner demons or a ravenous apex predator stalking the night, is a direct descendant of that ancient cursed king. The fiercely independent wolf warriors and the medieval demon, beast, filtered through centuries of fear, storytelling, cultural shifts, and technological innovation. It is a chameleon of horror, ever adapting to the deepest fears of its audience, forever howling at the moon, a chilling echo of our own untamed nature, and the ever-present, terrifying possibility of losing ourselves to the beast within. Forevermore, from the ancient cursed kings of Arcadia to the howling horrors under a silver screen moon. The werewolf's journey mirrors our own evolving fears, our understanding of the fragile human condition. It began as a whisper of divine judgment, a tragic fall from grace, a man consumed by his own hubris. It morphed into a primal roar of untamed, often demonic evil in the long shadows of medieval Europe, a symbol of heresy and ultimate depravity. And finally, it became the visceral, special effects-laden terror that stalks our nightmares today, a testament to humanity's enduring fascination with the beast within and the thin, permeable veil between the civilized and the savage. Each transformation, each new interpretation, has added another layer to its terrifying allure, making it an eternal fixture of our collective fears. But one truth remains unwavering: whether a victim of fate or a harbinger of chaos, the werewolf always forces us to confront the thin, fragile line between man and monster, and to ask ourselves what truly lurks in the shadows of our own souls. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell to join us on more journeys into the heart of myth and legend, where every shadow holds a story waiting to be told. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.